Rafe, of course, you've talked before about the importance of Commonwealth and the Queen's link to Australia in particular. Even though they've made this decision on the banknote, that will continue on the coinage.
It will continue on the coinage, but, make no mistake, this is a deliberate attempt to erase the visibility of the Australian monarchy. And it's actually part of a far wider attack on Australian history and culture and its proud British colonial heritage, if I can say, particularly by Australia's Labour government, which is, just as drenched in woke ideology as perhaps the Labour Party here is. And it comes alongside a recent decision by the government of Australia to appoint a Minister for the Republic, which is quite a nonsensical thing if you think about it. One of Her Majesty's Ministers of the Crown, a member of Her Majesty's Australian government, being a Minister for the Republic. And it's just a great shame, I think, that at this really critical moment for the monarchy in the Commonwealth, that you have in Canada and Australia and New Zealand such painfully woke governments. And there's such a contrast to 10 years ago when you had in Canada and Australia and New Zealand extremely pro-monarchist prime ministers, John Key, New Zealand, Stephen Harper, and Tony Abbott. And so in Canada, we don't even know, or New Zealand, whether they will replace the Queen on their $20 notes with the King. And I just think it's a huge shame. But the arguments that they put forward, the Reserve Bank of Australia and the government say that they want more Aboriginal representation. Well, fine. There are already Aboriginals represented on 3 of the 5 denominations of notes. The back of the $5 note that we're talking about here displays the Australian Parliament. I'm sure many Australians, given their low-standing view of the Australian Parliament people, would much prefer to see that used for this. But uniquely, Australian notes have 2 faces on each note. So they have 10 faces on their notes, or 9 actually, because the 5 only has 1. No other country has so many people that could be depicted on notes. There's clearly enough space for the King to be represented if they wanted. No, there's a wider agenda at play here.
The conclusion is, of course, they can put what they want on their banknotes, and one suspects that maybe that King Charles would be fairly relaxed on this particular issue if, of course, it's linked to the indigenous history of the country. But that in itself, of course, is a very controversial matter for the Australians and how those first Australians or the indigenous population was actually treated.
You're right, and certainly huge wrongs were done to the Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples. But as I say, they are already represented on several of the Australian banknotes, and many more initiatives have taken place by the different governments to ensure that they are fully incorporated into the fabric of the Australian family. But, as I said, this is part of a larger project currently underway. It's part of the global decolonisation project, if I can put it that way. You'll be familiar with the 1619 project in the USA, which seeks to change America's founding date from July the 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence, to the arrival of the first black slaves in 1619. And there's a similar debate now going on in Australia about changing the date of Australia Day, which marks when the British settlers first arrived. And, this whole attempt at trying to decolonize Australia is really just a reluctance to appreciate that it's thanks to Australia's British heritage that it's one of the world's richest, most successful, most stable countries. And if you want to go full decolonization, then why don't you get rid of democracy, get rid of the constitution, get rid of the economy, get rid of all the universities and education system and hospitals and medicine, all the things that make Australia, a great nation around the world, are due to its colonial inheritance. There are other ways in which you can incorporate Aboriginal culture into society without abolishing the monarchy.